So I wanted to talk about a particular scene in the Netflix film The Half of It by Alice Wu. So it takes place where Paul is over and he's cooking dinner, and um, Ellie and Paul had a falling out, and Ellie lives with her dad, so her dad's there and notices something's going on, and he says basically, "Did you and Ellie break up?" And Paul responds that we weren't together. And then he talks about how his daughter seemed so sad. Um, and then Paul says, "You don't see her, who she could be." And then we see some code switching because first Ellie's dad starts speaking English and says, like, "See her? What do you mean?" And then he starts to talk about in Mandarin to Paul, even though Paul doesn't speak Mandarin, only speaks English, that she looked at me and she basically was taking care of me. And what did I write down? He goes back and forth between Mandarin and English, but the important stuff he says in Mandarin, and just talks about like the aftermath when Ellie was 13 and her mom died and how they only had each other. And then he goes back to English and says, "Have you ever loved someone so much you don't want anything about her to change?" So there's like some code switching. It almost is like for Ellie's dad to say something so heartfelt about his daughter, it makes more sense to say it in Mandarin, or maybe it's so private or held so close to him that he doesn't even need Paul to understand what he's saying necessarily. But I thought that was a great example of code switching, because normally when you see Ellie and her dad communicate, it's in Mandarin and then they speak in English when they're around other people. But I love that he didn't change or try to make Paul more comfortable by changing his language, and just spoke authentically about his daughter and the death of his wife and Ellie's mom. And I thought it made it more meaningful and heartfelt that he was speaking his first language, and didn't care if Paul understood what he was saying or not. He's gonna say that, like how he actually feels in Mandarin. It's almost like his body language and his face could kind of construe what he means, and Paul doesn't necessarily have to know exactly what he's saying.